Okay, I'd like to introduce Josh, who I saw his work about 18 months ago when he was at an exhibit at the Botanic Gardens. And I was just blown away by his work, which was amazing. And he'd never heard of me. I contacted him, and immediately he got back to me and said he would love to participate in Speaking for the Planet. It addressed three of the things that he was really interested in. One, his art, of course. Second, communicating his art about his artwork with young people. And thirdly, that he has a particular interest at them now for himself on the effects of climate change and how that's influenced his art. And I'm sure you will see this influence and how brilliantly he portrays a lot of the concerns we have about the effects of climate change on our world, our animals in particular. And I hope you enjoy his artwork and looking at how he creates his artwork, which is an amazing process in itself. Thank you, Josh. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. So just confirming everyone can see my first slide there?
Yes.
Wombat. Awesome. Yeah. So, as Robin said, my name is Josh Dykgraaf. I call myself a photographic manipulation artist. So that is, I originally trained as, I did a double in photography and graphic design. Essentially, my work revolves around taking photos of a whole bunch of material and then recompositing it and recontextualizing it into other forms. So in the case of the piece that you see here, that's a wombat recreated from landscapes of the Grampians Ranges in Victoria that I shot. So my series looks at exploring that kind of relationship between animal and habitat, and also in a lot of the work as well looks at issues affecting those animals as well. In particular, so the animal on the right here is an alpine pygmy possum. They're critically endangered, with only a couple of small habitats left, and less than 1,000 or less than 2,000 of them left in the wild. I talk a lot. I talk a big game about wildlife conservation and climate, but on another level as well, my work is an ongoing scheme to get people to pay me to do my favorite things, and that is photoshopping stuff, photography, and hiking. Yeah, I love my job. My background's in commercial illustration, working in stuff for like advertising, magazines, that kind of thing. So like the image that you see here on the screen at the moment was a collaboration between zoo and an ice cream company in Scandinavia, taking photos of the animals that they have there in the zoo and other elements of it, and drawing that all together. This is a series of infographics that I created for a carbon credit program, and creating visuals for how the whole system works. This is a piece that I made recently for a magazine cover, looking at the tech industry, the tech industry in China and the changes happening in it right now. And I had to very quickly create. I was given the brief of creating a Chinese dragon made from images of phones and other technology like wires, cables, that kind of thing. This is another piece I made recently as well for the words have left my head. A digestive product. Doesn't matter. It's not important. This is the stuff that's important. So I kind of fell out of love with that kind of commercial work, and my art practice is basically taking that skill set and applying it to something that I find a lot more meaning in. This piece here is created in the form of a Tasmanian masked owl, created from images that I shot while bushwalking around Mount Wellington outside Hobart. Each piece that I make has a kind of a core seed of a visual idea attached to it. So it might be noticing that these flowers here, so you can see these are the flowers that I used that form the chest of the bird. noticing that these could be used as an adaptation for fur or very fine feathers in this case. These are the sandalwood flowers that I used to create the mask of the owl or the face of the owl. Sometimes that's the seed of the idea is relatively simple, just noticing that leaves often have a similar shape and form to feathers. So how about a whole bird made out of leaves? That kind of thing. Each piece that I create is pretty time intensive to make. There's anywhere between 30 and 80 hours at my desk. I bring the work together in Photoshop. And often by the time I've finished creating each piece, there'll be a couple of thousand layers in each image. Particularly this one in particular is very heavy in that regard, because there's two subjects. For each piece, I'll start by shooting a reference image of the animal. So usually like in zoos and aquariums, but sometimes in the wild as well, or while I'm out bushwalking. And I'll shoot secondary materials that I think could work to fit that animal. So in this case, I identified the leaves of Banksia leaves have the right shape and form to match the feathers of these red-tailed black cockatoos. And then I had the idea that these grevillea flowers that are also in, so the two black cockatoos here are in the Healesville Sanctuary near where I'm based in Melbourne. And I had the idea, like I had the observation that I could use those grevilleas, particularly for the tail. And so I'll start with that reference image of the animal and layer up from all these other images that I've taken. Often for most of the project, I'll go bushwalking somewhere with my camera and snap away at anything that looks interesting for a couple of days, identifying things that I think could correspond to different parts of the animal. And I'll cut those pieces out and build them up over the top of those reference images, kind of blending and shading it all together as I go. So the idea is to go combing through those photos and identifying sections of them that I think have the right angle and the right lighting to match each part of the animal's anatomy. And then, yeah, build that up in sort of like almost like a hyper-real collage. There we go. So this was the very first piece in the series. Basically, I was scrubbing through some images of mountains for a totally different project, and I just had the observation that some of the rock formations had the wrinkled skin, had the texture that looked like the wrinkled skin of an elephant. And it was sort of as simple as how cool would it be if I made an entire elephant out of mountains? And yeah, people really responded to that, and I really enjoyed making it. And all of all of the early pieces in this series I've been developing. Sorry. I started developing this series in 2019. All of the early pieces in the series were much more playful, sort of playing with the simple visual idea. Like, so you saw earlier with the wombat, the idea of using bushland as fur, leaves as feathers, that kind of thing. And then something pretty big happened. We had that catastrophic fire season at the end of 2019 and early 2020. For Australia's wildlife, that was an extinction event. It was absolutely catastrophic. The smoke from those fires up and down our east coast reached as far away as South America and blanketed Chile in smog. Normally, when these fires so bushfires, as I'm guessing everyone here will probably know, bushfires are a natural part of the way that Australia's landscape works. It's part of the way our flora regenerates. Climate change is making these events just that bit more extreme every time, and pushing the thresholds of what our wildlife can survive. Ordinarily, when these fires happen, our wildlife has adapted such that they can basically move to a new area when their habitat is burnt out. When the fires are that extreme, they can't do that. And essentially what we were seeing was mass starvation. I realized the series I'd been working on could work really well as a vehicle to discuss these issues. And at the same time as well, I was having a pretty strong emotional response to some of these things as well. Particularly the news that one of our national animals, the koala, is now projected to become extinct in the wild in the next few decades. So I traveled out to East Gippsland here in Victoria to where the big fire fields were here. And I went bushwalking through those fields for a couple of days and capturing images and cataloging the fire fields. And I created the piece that you see here on the right. A pair of koalas made out of images of those burnt out landscapes. This image is today still probably one of my favorite things that I've ever made across my entire career. When I exhibited this piece on the wall at art shows and art fairs, sometimes people would just start crying, especially when I exhibited it quite large, because it really tapped into this shared experience that so many Australians have. And as an artist, like being able to make people feel something that strongly, even if it's a negative experience, is just enormously gratifying. And just makes it all feel so much more worthwhile if I can, reach people on that kind of level. So much more, and it's so much more gratifying than the advertising stuff. So that kind of sent my work on a different trajectory, and it kind of gave me something else that I really care about quite a bit. And I started exploring other environmental issues and other conservation issues. Immediately after those fires, we had the pandemic. It's estimated during each year of the pandemic, 2 billion disposable face masks made their way into the world's ocean. And they'll take centuries to decompose. We're causing enough problems on this planet already without kicking off brand new, very preventable disasters. So in response to that, I collected some face masks, discarded face masks off the streets here in Melbourne. You could tell my daily walk when the 2021 lockdowns kicked in was taking me past the hospital, St. Vincent's Hospital here every day. And you could tell when the restrictions had come in at the hospital, because suddenly there were masks and gloves discarded almost in a radial pattern out from the entrance. And I collected some of them and photographed them under a studio light. And then I created this piece. So particularly for whales in particular are impacted by the plastic pollution in the oceans. So as you may know, when the whales eat by gliding along under the ocean with their mouths open, consuming water and filtering out the plankton. What happens is they'll also pick up the plastic and it will build up in their gut as they basically have no way to metabolize the plastic. And it builds up and it builds up until it kills them. Yeah. This is another piece I made in that series, this time using those disposable surgical gloves. And I've also experimented with other ideas as well. So this piece is made into the form of a bogong moth, using images of mountain ranges or satellite images of mountain ranges and the areas of Western New South Wales. The bogong moth is on a pretty sharp path to extinction at the moment. And it's one of the first species on the planet where we can directly attribute that extinction to climate change. Essentially, the ambient temperatures rising by a few degrees inside the caves where they breed when they reproduce has made them unsuitable for them. And with nowhere to reproduce, the numbers are falling like a rock. Art is an incredibly powerful way to reach people. It's in a way that regular conventional photography of these different phenomena that I'm looking at can't always do. It's a way to capture people's attention and draw them into an issue and keep them engaged in a way that, so this piece here I made in reference to the fire. You may have seen there were some enormous fires that happened in North America last year, around this time last year, actually. There were headlines that, well, there were images circulating in the news of various cities in North America just being covered in smoke from fires happening in Canada, specifically like New York and LA had just disappeared in the smoke. If you imagine, so Canada is a place that's roughly the same, has roughly the same land mass as Australia, except 50% of it is forest. They had fires that started burning in March of that year, and they didn't stop until the snow started falling in November. It was the largest fire season that this planet's ever seen. I find art is a way to get people talking about and get people engaged with these issues in a way that when people see images like this of wildlife in this kind of distress, your first response is you really don't want to look at it. And you really don't want to put it up on your wall at home. But if you can create a sense of wonder and spectacle that draws people into it and gets people talking about it, I don't know, I find it so much more engaging and a better way to reach people. This image here I created a few months ago. This one takes the form of a Morgian skate. They're a species that's native to the west coast of Tasmania, and again, they're also on a pretty sharp path to extinction in the next decade. In this case, though, it's something we can actually do something about. It's happening because we introduced Atlantic salmon to their habitat in industrial levels for farming, and those salmon reduce the oxygen levels in the skate's habitat, and basically the species is suffocating. Their numbers have been cut in half every 5 or 6 years for the last few decades now, and yeah. But if I can make something that's kind of, the magic happens when I can kind of align the Venn diagram of something that's both beautiful and engaging and still has that issue. Like it's, yeah. And if I can connect with people as well, this is also one of my favorite pieces. So this one takes the form of a gang cockatoo. They're native to the east coast of Australia. You see, actually, well, the one I shot here is actually outside Mittagong in the national park there. It's probably one of the healthiest populations of them I've encountered. Again, their numbers have crashed by about 70% in the last 20 years. They used to be, I grew up outside Canberra, in Goulburn. And like they used to be ubiquitous there. But they just disappeared in the days of them being in my mum's backyard, are over. And yeah, like the particularly in Canberra, there's a strong connection with them as well. They're on the crest of the ACT. It's the animal of the ACT. And so people feel a strong sense of connection with the animal, and especially I find with birds, with the bird pieces, people attach a sense of personality and like superimpose an identity on those pieces. With the koalas as well, because people, they're like, it's a fairly cute animal that people feel like they can engage with, and that helps reach people on another level as well. Yeah, yeah, I think that's all I have for today. Thanks for I originally kept this short for the day in Sydney last month, but
Okay. Kyle, there have been comments, probably you haven't been able to read them, so please do. I think there's where everybody is mightily impressed with your work. I'd like to have a bit of question time now,
sure.
if that's okay with you. And can I lead
Absolutely.
it off with not really a question, but can can you go back to the gang, please?
Mm.
Okay, this was the one that I saw first off that blew me away. And can you talk a little bit about the feathers on this bird, please?
Oh. So, so this one adopts the idea that I mentioned before about leaves often having a similar shape and form to feathers. So I mentioned that the gang's population has crashed by about 70% in the last 20 years, and that's almost entirely due to habitat destruction. And the single biggest cause of that has been bushfire. The second biggest cause has been just agricultural destruction. And I wanted to create. So with each piece, I need to have that core visual idea. And you might so if you're familiar with the gang, you'll know that they have that brilliant red, fiery orange crest. And so the idea is sort of as simple as, okay, so what if that crest was fire? And then, yeah, just developed from there. So for this one, I photographed leaves. So you've got, I photographed leaves in a campfire, basically. I photographed them while they burned. And then also I scorched a bunch of other ones as well. Yeah.
So they're actually burnt leaves.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm.
I think that is a really powerful image reflecting around our the environmental impact on the climate and the impact it has on our native wildlife.
The sea creatures I found most amazingly beautiful but sad.
Thank you. That's the series I'm developing right now. Like the skate is part of a series I'm developing right now with the Australian. I'm working on my next solo show is going to be next March, and the whole series is going to be marine themed.
Oh, where's that going to be?
That'll be here in Melbourne. But but it will be part of, as Robin mentioned, like my bread and butter I found as an artist has been that I exhibit in art fairs very 3 or 4 times a year. I'm usually in Sydney a couple of times a year. So I will be bringing a lot of that work with me up to Sydney. I'm coming back in October, actually. Third to the 6th. So in the next month or so, I'll have a bunch of free tickets to give out if anyone wants them.
We'll say yes to that. The other thing, can I say, and I don't know whether any of our the people are here, I don't know whether Amelia's gone or not, but one of the things that Josh does is he will, he has to make money. He makes his money through his advertising. Right? Yeah. He does sell these, but I don't think he can survive on what he sells from his wonderful artwork. But he also does teaching at schools. So that's another thing that I think, I don't know, for me, Josh, this is a really powerful way to make people engage with what's happening in our world. I don't know what other people think. Any other comments?
Could I say something?
Perfect. Wonderful. Billy, go for it.
Well, just a couple of things. Firstly, Josh, that was just so beautiful. And I'm glad I've heard these comments from you and Robin about how you're disseminating your work. I think we would be very interested down the track in perhaps having an exhibition of your work.
Sure.
Working with one of the councils or all of the councils in our area. I just think it's we've got to find ways to extend your audience. But I wanted to ask, have you had any contact with the Biodiversity Council or the Australian Conservation Foundation? They would be very interested in your work. And they do things like print Christmas cards and, stuff like that. And of course, they have all their media outlets, and they also have big donors, which we don't have, but they do, which may also create more opportunities for you. And if there's anything we could do, I mean, I don't know, to help you in that establishing a relationship with organisations such as that.
That'd be fantastic. I would be very up for that.
Would be interested in trying to do that.
I'd be very, very interested in that.
Okay, so when you come up in October, where are you exhibiting?
And it's the other art fair. It's in Roselle this year.
Oh, not far away.
Yeah, at the White Bay Ferry Terminal.
Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll have to meet with you at that stage, and
let's do it
and see what we can do to to extend your reach. Just quickly, I know others want to ask you questions. The other thing is, there's not much work that I saw. There was a bit of habitat for certainly for the land animals, and of course, this whole story is really about habitat loss. Well, not only habitat loss, but very much about habitat loss, because habitat is disappearing because of fire, because of floods, because of other, climate effects, and also human intervention and greed. To have some stories of animals in a habitat that's been lost or is under threat itself might be something also that you might do down the track. But anyway, don't it's not up to the likes of me to tell you what you should be doing at all. But what we should be focusing more is how we can help you reach a wider audience. And I hope we can do that somehow.
Thanks, Billy. I think it'd be a great idea if we could have an exhibition. I think that sounds like a really fun, engaging.
Speaking of exhibitions, if we could go back to the gang for a second, because there's actually the only local art gallery in where I live in Lithgow is actually named the Gang Art Gallery. It's named after the bird. And I actually happen to know the owner quite well. Would you like to do an exhibition there? I'm sure I could convince her.
Sure. Yeah.
Sweet.
Absolutely.
Also, one more question. An idea just popped into my head while looking at your amazing art, and I just kind of typed it down, so I'll read you what I typed. Movie idea. A movie about a kid meeting the spirit animals of Australia and learning about the environmental impact on the animals they represent. The extinction of an animal means the death of the spirit. This will happen in the movie. I didn't really get beyond that, but I was thinking, based on your art, how would you like to work on a kind of movie pitch for that movie idea? Because I think that could be a very powerful movie combined with your art. Like the spirit animals would essentially be your artistic style. And so it's an idea that came to mind. What do you think?
Yeah.
I think Josh is open to all ideas. Whether that,
well, actually, the thing I'm playing with right now, I have very mixed thoughts on AI. But something one thing about AI I am particularly interested in is the idea of, I've been mucking around with animating my pieces using AI tools.
Wow.
Which I think could, like, it's in the very early stages yet. I haven't got any results yet that I think are worth showing the world. Yeah, I mean, I have from a pretty early stage, I've been pretty interested in the idea of animating these pieces and bringing them to life in another level. Like, if you can imagine, like, this piece right here, the gang, if the piece is, if it like behaving like a cockatoo, and the crest is actually, and the fire is animated, and it's just.
Oh dear.
I know people in circles who could probably make that happen. who could probably actually use 3D modeling and animation programs to make that happen. I wouldn't be using the AI, but I know a few people who would love to make that happen, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, particularly an old teacher of mine. I think she'd go nuts for this idea.
Getting a movie script up is harder than getting Donald Trump to tell the truth, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but a small group of hardworking individuals, could probably get it done.
Waiting a very long time. So before I ask my question, would you like to go ahead and say something?
Mine?
Yeah.
Okay. And the museum and sometimes not only the Australian Museum have every year the wildlife photography.
I do.
And
Yes.
and I could see this
Yes.
as another section of that wildlife photography, which is always phenomenal. So
in the past, I have reached out to groups like that. I like not recently. I've run into some. So my medium is digital art, and I've run into a problem particularly for say art, for example, for art prizes. So my work is on one hand, my work is way too heavily manipulated to appeal to the photography crowd. And on the other hand, it's too digital and too photographic for more illustrative and traditional fine art spaces. But yeah, if I could, hopefully.
I certainly look forward to seeing it at the other art fair there in White Bay.
Josh, I was on a judging panel when your presentation happened at Speaking for the Planet, so I didn't get to talk about how much I've been blown away by this when I gave you the lift back to the airport. Look, we've had a lot of presentations over the last few years at Climate Action Burwood-Canada Bay, but this is one of the most powerful we've actually had. It's blown everybody away. I mean, looking at the comments in the chat, it's just absolutely blown everybody away. And Billy is absolutely right. You need to get to a much wider audience than this through a bigger organization like the ACF. And we'll see what we can do. We've got contacts in all the major state and national organizations. So we'll see what we can do to get you to a wider audience, because the message you've got here is just so powerful. It's words can say things, but these images just get to the heart.
Yeah, they do. I think the possibilities are so many. And I think that whole, as you said, Josh, the emotional connection that people have with photos like this is so much more powerful than any lecture that you can go to. And particularly I find, having worked in this area a lot, facts and figures don't motivate anybody. That stuff we all know, after a while you're thrown so many facts and figures about everything now, whereas this sort of visual really does, I think, affect people.
I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
It's
If you have when you have exhibitions, and if we try to help to facilitate more, do you earn from those? How does it work?
So it depends. I mean, so I've been getting, I'm coming to a point now where I am the majority of my income is coming from the art. And so I mentioned the art fairs have become my bread and butter. Basically, the reason for that is they'll get somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people through the door over 4 days. And you're never going to get anything close to that number at a gallery show. Of course, it's also a question of getting the right people. So smaller gallery shows, galleries with access to, or with an audience that's very engaged, and has the money to support that art, can be a very successful avenue as well. But it's like a numbers game. Also, I do really enjoy being able to reach large numbers of people through those events. And as Robin said, particularly so fairs also generally have a younger audience. And I do really enjoy reaching out to those groups and engaging with kids. Watching kids respond to my work when they come up to it at fairs is always a buzz for me, particularly. And it's also pretty useful too, because I'll always get very unfiltered feedback, which is also always very handy.
You sell these
Yeah.
prints, do you, Josh?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
So
how he
mo,
makes-
mo
And how
That's
much
how he
you
makes
sell
his
them
money.
for?
Good
There
job.
may be a few people here who'd like to buy them.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
most of the pieces I sell, so I sell them all as limited edition prints, in 3 sizes. So like I have an A4 size, that's generally around about $150. All the work is available in a size that's roughly 60 centimeters wide by 80 centimeters tall, in addition to 20. And in the ballpark cost for that is $750, $850, and then also in a much larger size that's about 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall. And then the size that varies. That the cost of that one varies because the production cost varies pretty greatly for that as well.
And you can buy these via your website.
Yeah, they're all up there.
Oh, I'll give you a plug on that. The next weekend.
And I say the art fair, Josh's work stood out above and beyond most other things, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, are there any other questions, folks? Because we're at 7:30 and we haven't.
And Josh, thank you. No doubt you will be hearing from us again. I'm not sure about where digital art is going to stand next year in Speaking for the Planet, but in actual fact, Speaking for the Planet is going to happen. I've actually had sort of queries, I think, already from 3 schools about the possibilities at their schools. So the first year I had to go out and canvass and say, would you be willing to, it'll be like this. Now I think people have seen what it's about, and your presentation certainly made this year Speaking for the Planet so much more engaging, and as you say, your images are so powerful a message. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.